Mm. What's going on, Kyle?
Just trying to stay warm up here. It's been a pretty cold winter so far.
Yeah, you guys have had real cold. Juneau's had an absolute ton of snow, and we've had some snow, but there's none on the ground right now. It kind of warmed up last couple days, and so it's been in the 40s.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been real cold up here. We're finally getting some snow. We've got probably close to 2 feet in the last couple weeks, which is we really needed it for sure. But before that, like most of December was below zero into January. We've had several days in like the -30, -35 degrees. Some places here in Willow we're hitting like -40s, which is from what I've been told, like in the past, that's like a normal Willow thing. They haven't seen that for a long time though. But yeah, a lot of issues with the septic lines freezing. Our septic vent kept freezing. Yeah, just a lot of issues. And then where we're at, we were protected from the winds, but like Wasilla and Palmer, they just got absolutely hammered by winds most of December. So it's been a pretty rough winter here in South Central. But again, we were due for one of those for sure.
Yeah. What do you do to protect your water lines, sewer lines, things like that? Do you have Arctic piping? Do you have heat trace? What do you do?
We have some heat trace that was already installed on our line from our well into the house. I don't know how far that goes in, but I plug that in for our septic vent. I wrapped like a heat trace around the vent going out, and then I had to go up and like actually clear the pipe itself on the top of the
Mm.
roof. Other than that, though, we're pretty lucky. We've got the lines below the house stay pretty warm, and we got the wood stove, and we've got a boiler as well. So we've got a couple sources of heat, and it tends to keep things pretty warm. But
Nice.
like our unheated garage, there was some water that I had in there that was like getting a crust of ice on it. So it was like in the low 30s in our garage. So but besides that, like our septic lines going outside of the house, I just cross my fingers and pray really, and hopefully
Yeah.
something doesn't happen.
Yeah, we don't have we'll have a couple stretches per year, maybe 2 or 3 stretches per year where it gets below freezing, so I
Mm,
put the heat trace on because we have above ground piping,
mm,
took up our utilities. The front part of our lot is just a bunch of fill that was pushed over off the building pad, so the building pad's good, but then all this fluff, they couldn't dig down, and it's pretty
mm,
steep, so we had to go above ground, and it was super expensive. But for those couple weeks, it's the only thing to keep it from freezing is that heat trace and the Arctic pipe that has, I think it's 8 inches of insulation around it. So
mm.
you got to do it. There's no way you can run that risk. So just part of the life up here, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, it warmed up here to like 19, I think today or 20, and I'm like taking all my layers off and feeling good now. Feeling in the upper 20s or low 20s feels pretty hot.
Yeah. So it's got to be like stew weather. Are you having a moose stew? Are you having backstrap? What the eating season, the warm eating comfort mood season is upon us.
Yeah, for sure. No, I've been eating a lot of moose roasts for sure, throwing them in the crock pot with, potatoes, onions, carrots, celery. This last week I made a couple big roasts on Saturday, so we had roast Sunday, and then I shredded up all of that meat. And one of my favorite dishes is enchiladas with mole sauce. I don't know if you ever had the mole sauce
Yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah.
So I found this recipe online and got some corn tortillas. I got some canned mole sauce. I got like that fancy, was it trombolone chocolate or something, like the triangle
Mm.
shaped one, and made a really big pot of mole sauce and put my enchiladas in there. And I shredded up all that moose meat and put it in the enchiladas. A little bit of crema sauce on there, crumble some cheese. It was awesome. So just trying to
Nice.
experiment and make different dishes. And you've always got your old staples like tacos, burritos. Tonight I think we're doing like a teriyaki bowl with some moose or some bear. But yeah, definitely trying to branch out, and definitely those slower cooked meals, the soups, the stews, the roasts. That definitely feels really good this time of year. If you're working outside, come back in, have something hot and ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, the online recipe thing can be a crapshoot. Sometimes you find one and it looks pretty good. There's pictures, and then you follow the directions and you think this is mediocre at best. Like who it had to be like an AI recipe or something like this because no human would put this stuff together. And sometimes you can't look at the ingredient list and detect that. You have to actually go through it, and it can be pretty unfortunate. Abby's had a couple of those where she's making some like biscuits or something. And she goes to another recipe. She Googles it and tries it, and it ends up like not sticking together, or that just the doesn't work. But trial and error. So sometimes you regret not doing those standbys if you have a recipe you know that works, and you try to branch off, and I don't want to say wasted some good moose meat, but you could have just gone with what works.
Yeah, for sure. No, I've been pretty lucky so far, but there's definitely some things I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do something a little bit different, or like this one called for a little bit of chocolate, and I ended up throwing like a whole bar in there to make it just a
Mhm,
little bit sweeter. But no, luckily been pretty lucky so far.
mhm. So you got a moose this year and you got a moose last year. Both were spike forks. Is that right?
Mhm. Yep.
Did you completely eat the previous moose? I know you guys go hard after the moose meat. Some people have leftovers just because they only have it once or twice a week, whereas I could see you two eating it, 2, 3 times a day. Were you completely cleaned out?
No, we actually had quite a bit left over from 24. 24's moose, I mostly turned into grind because that's tends to be what we eat more of, throwing it in like tacos and teriyaki bowls and stuff. But this last year's moose, because we still had so much grind left over, I almost completely turned this one into roasts so that we have
Perfect.
kind of two different things. So if we want to roast, I'll grab some of 25s. If I want grind, I'll grab some of 24s. But because I harvested a black bear this last spring, we ended up eating quite a bit of bear meat this summer
Mhm.
as well. So I think if I hadn't harvested the bear, we probably would have had far less moose left over. But that bear was so good that it took up a big chunk of our diet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the nice thing about the ground is that you don't lose much quality. So if it's in there for a
Mhm.
year or 2, it's fine. You put it into something and you bury it, it's no big deal. We tend to eat tenderloin and then backstrap just right off the bat. Those premium cuts are gone right off the bat. Those are gonna age, and you'll kinda sense the difference, or that it's been in there for a little while. But ground, it doesn't even matter. So if it's in there for 2 years, whatever, as long as it's not really freezer burn. But even then, if, like, the edges are a little bit freezer burn, like, it's going into tacos, man. Like, how is that not gonna still be good? You put the seasoning on it, and it's great shape.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, for sure. The back straps and stuff, I'll definitely take and eat, like, just make, like, a regular steak or something out of it, but a lot of those I'll actually save and, like, for those special moments, like, if we go to, like, a Christmas dinner or, like, a potluck
Mm.
style thing, I'll make, steak bits, or I'll do are you familiar with the char siu pork? It's like the Asian pork that you can slice up and you eat with the hot mustard and the sesame seeds.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so I have a recipe that I'll do that, and I'll marinate either a deer back strap or a moose back strap in that, char siu sauce for, like, 12 to 24 hours, and then I'll actually throw it on the smoker, and I'll get it to just, like, at rare, medium rare, and then I'll slice it up really thin, and I'll do that a lot of times with my back straps or my tenderloins, and that's usually pretty big hit at some of those potlucks that I go to.
Nice. Yeah. What what about your vegetables? You talked about potatoes and celery and whatnot. Do you grow potatoes up there?
We do, yep, yep. We grow enough in the summer that, whenever we want a meal, we can go out and grab some. We haven't grown and expanded to the point where we have enough to last us throughout the entire winter quite yet. Goal this summer is to build a greenhouse and have a little bit more capability to grow and, hopefully store some. We definitely can some of our vegetables, freeze some of them. But yeah, a lot of the stuff that we're buying from the store and using for every meal.
Yeah. Abby loves the greenhouse, and we love having the potatoes. Just the small little, clinking potatoes down here are awesome. They're nice and just to have around, super crispy, make fries out of them or something like that. But, yeah, it's so nice to have that and be that self-sufficient. Just tastes so much heartier than stuff you buy at the store.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So you've been doing some writing for the is it Frontiersman, right? Is that the Frontiersman?
Yep. Yep.
Right. Now, is a Matsu paper, or is it more like Palmer or a more Wasilla paper?
It's for the whole Matsu. I believe our area is like, I think my editor says like the size of West Virginia. So basically, it goes, all the way up to like Trapper Creek, probably up
Oh, okay.
closer towards like almost Cantwell, and then all the way up to like Sutton and Chickaloon, and then all the way down to like the Knick. So it's a pretty big area. I've been writing for them. I did a little bit when I first moved up here in 21 in the winter. I think I might have written like a dozen stories that winter. It took a couple of years where I didn't do anything for them, and then when moved up here in 24 in the winter, I reached back out and said, "Hey, I'd like to do some more work for you guys." And they brought me on as a freelancer, and I've slowly worked up more from there to the point where I'm now writing about 15 to 20 stories a month for them, just various different types of news, really whatever kind of assignment they send me on. I get to cover some sporting events like the state swimming. State wrestling's always really fun being down there on the mat and, grabbing those kids right as soon as they get off the mat and, they just won the state championship in their division and, they're breathing hard and they're super excited, super pumped. That's always fun. And then I really do a lot of the small business reporting and a lot of the stuff I can do off my phone, but definitely I really enjoy going to some of these places and doing stuff in person. So yeah, small business, some sporting events, just general news. I don't do a ton of like the sitting in the meetings and doing that kind of stuff. That's not really
Oof.
my cup of tea.
No, no, that's for a particular type of person. I'm glad they exist because that's not me.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's been really fun. I get a lot of flexibility with that, and then being able to do that in the summertime as well when I'm guiding, dropping my amount of stories down, but still trying to get some out there. And then this summer, I also was given the opportunity to have a weekly column with them. So I've been doing that since about July, and I try to focus it more on outdoor stuff. So in the summer, I'm basically writing like basically a fishing report based off of what I've been seeing, or maybe a trip that I've been on. Like I wrote about the Russian quite a bit this year. I did several trips down to the Russian River and kind of writing about my experiences there. And then going into the fall, talking about like hunting moose and kind of the story that I was going through my season, and then now into winter talking more about like planning trips and what we can be looking forward to this year. This week's article is about what fly patterns people should be tying up right now for the summer, and then last week was talking about like my favorite recipes for game and fish. So like I said, get a lot of flexibility to pretty much write about whatever topic I want to write about.
Nice. Do you like the column writing better than the feature? I know you wrote this feature I'm looking at right now, the father-daughter preparing to race in the Iron Dog together. Gotta be a cool thing. You're doing more of the feature writing journalism where you're interviewing this family and getting some insight into their Iron Dog racing. Or do you like the anecdotal, what you're seeing column writing?
I enjoy both. They're both very different. With the column, I can sit down in front of my stove on my computer or on my phone and knock out a column anecdotally in like a half hour or something. I'll just a lot of times I'll sit there like the day that my column is due and I'm like, what do I want to write about? And I'll sit there for like 10 or 15 minutes and like, okay, I'll write about fly patterns and I'll just crank it out really fast. But these features like for the Iron Dog story, I really do enjoy reaching out to these people and asking them these questions. But I think I interviewed both of the people in the article, and both of them were about a 20-minute conversation, and just really getting to know those people. And then I think that my two favorite parts are when I initially reach out to the person and be like, "Hey, I'm with the Frontiersman newspaper. We would really like to feature you in our story." And then the initial excitement from those people, like, "Oh, we're going to get featured," and them really looking forward to that. And then, like yesterday, when I didn't realize it was going to be on the front page of this week's paper, and then reaching out and saying, like, "Hey, your story's on the front page," and then seeing their reaction or hearing a response, like, "Hey, thank you so much for writing this article," and just getting the word out. I think that's my favorite thing. Last week, I submitted an article on this organization called Women Hunting Alaska, and they're a group of outdoors women that get together for both in person and like virtual courses, and it's all about empowering women in the outdoors and getting more women out there. And I reached out to the person in charge, Carrie Ann Mueller, and we had a really long conversation. She was really excited to be featured, and then she actually texted me a couple days ago and said because of that article, they actually had more women join the organization and become more aware. And just hearing that was really rewarding to me to know that people are reading that content and being able to connect with others because of something that I put out there.
Yeah. Yeah, the storytelling is so fun, and it's not about you, it's just about telling the truth and then connecting
Mhm.
people. So it's I think kind of the modern journalist sometimes gets distracted by wanting to have their name out there, and you kind of see that in sports quite a bit, where some of these people on ESPN have these outrageous takes, but that's what you need to do in order to stand out. And it's less about content; it's more about people viewing and clicking and whatnot. And a lot of times, it's people that disagree with it, but the core tenet of journalism of truth telling and telling interesting stories and doing the interview and making it about the source, that makes it so much more fun because you're just telling these it's very very relatable, and it's less about you. Once the ego gets in there, then it can be a little bit. We both write columns, so there's maybe a little bit of ego in there, but we kind of temper that down and make it more self deprecating. But it's nice to tell stories and connect people and allow people to either then connect themselves or be impacted by it. It's a cool thing you can contribute to the community.
Yeah, yeah, and I really take a lot of those, especially, like, the small businesses, especially, like, here in Willow, featuring some of these places in the community and the people that I interact with sometimes on a daily basis. I really take it personally, and I try my best to put everything in a good light and be honest and truthful and just try to do the best that I can because I really do genuinely care about the people that I'm recording, and in no way would I want to get something incorrect and try to edit anything that would be, like in that Iron Dog story, I got one of the dates wrong, and then,
Mm.
it's just a date, and so it's not like a super huge deal in the overall scheme of things, but I know to those people it's very important, and so I try my best to fix those mistakes and just try to learn and grow from them for sure.
Yeah, getting it right is so nerve-wracking. If in the moment someone is telling you the story and it's kind of unclear and you have to ask those clarifying questions because you wanna make sure you get it right, or later on when you're doing the writing, you just wanna get it right, and
Mhm.
it's tough, but it's a fun challenge.
It is for sure.
What is something that you kind of want to write about or something that you're working on, something that like, stories that need to be told outside of regular people, but what do you think maybe even the state of Alaska could benefit from as paper staffs are shrinking and papers are shrinking and they're bought up by private equity firms? What do you hope going forward continues to be told, or what stories continue to be told, or what needs to be amplified? What do you want going forward?
I really do like the small business features and getting those out there because I think a lot of these places people don't hear about, whether it's the small businesses or certain people in the community. I know last year I did a feature on a veteran owned bladesmithing shop. And I think a lot of those places, they get kind of like pushed under the rug, I guess. Like you don't see a lot of these people. And I think that's really important to feature the people in your community, and I feel like that also drives a lot more traffic to, like, the newspaper, whereas, if you're only reporting on, you know, city council meetings or you're only reporting on school sports, I mean, a lot of these things are important, but I think it is important to feature the overall community, so I do my best to really focus on, like, outdoor stories, whether that is, like, an outdoor business. Like, I try to feature, Screaming Eagle Archery here in Wasilla as much as I can, Three Rivers Fly and Tackle. I've done a feature on one of the gun stores in Palmer, and really trying to get that voice out there into the community and then bring more of those people to engage with the paper and journalism in the future. I also personally, with my column, I'd like to do more work on some of the conservation pieces in Alaska. I'd like to do more research and put more information out there about some of these things, like some of the access roads that are proposed, some of the the federal versus the state lands. I'd like to write more about that from a more of like an investigative journalism piece. I don't feel like
Mhm.
there's as much of that, and I know that takes a lot of work and a lot more research. But I definitely think that's something that's important. That what I would definitely like to see more.
Yeah. Yeah, the unfortunate thing, you and I both enjoy our positions at our papers as freelance writers, but if you're being on staff, those jobs just don't pay, and they're getting fewer and fewer because whether it's the private equity or the funding is you have a reporter to cover all those things. So they have to go to the city
Mhm.
council and they cover sports and they cover there's just way too much. And then the paper's got to be filled also with AP stuff from around the state or from around the
Mhm.
country. It's a lot of pressure for a professional journalist. And the expectations are really rough. I mean, some publications can afford some freelancers, some really can't. So it's really so many of those elements fall through. So you might have really good sports coverage, but nothing really about outdoors or conservation, or you have really good political coverage, which you absolutely need, but really, then the local kids don't get much because the focus is on politics, and it's kind of too bad that these areas don't have robust staffs that can cover everything. In addition to freelance writers, and I think we do lose if if we don't have that. If it's not that we do this for the money, but you putting your time and your effort into, like, there should be some expectation of some sort of compensation. But yeah, it would be nice if there was funding for all of these elements, and so we could really have all those stories told. Like you said, with road access, Ambler, and with Pebble, and those stories are picked up by Meat Eater and Outdoor Life and Field and Stream or whatnot. But a lot of times you have people who don't live here that are reporting on it, and they do a heck of a job because they
Mhm.
reach out to people, they have access to sources, they do a heck of a job, and they interview some local people. But having that local angle, I live here, I'm writing about it, I think is pretty awesome to have, and definitely needed. So I want to write more about like roadless rule and things like that. To just inform people and educate people. There's a really good argument for both. We need development. We are highly dependent on that sort of stuff, whether it be for the state or even local economies. Like local economies, a lot of times rely on things like tourism. Tourism doesn't really bring in a whole lot of money for the state as far as revenue that we can use to function, but it's really important to local communities. So we have to have it's not really a balance, it's more of like a trade-off, but those things need to be discussed.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that the episode you did with Katie Hill, the one that you just
Mhm.
released this week, and that was what really got me thinking about doing more pieces like that where I'm really going more in depth, and that is definitely something I wanna do into the future, and yeah, just try to get those stories out from a local perspective.
Yeah, I think it's funny, giving yourself permission is important. My buddy Matt is an artist down here, and he did kinda art on the side, and it wasn't until he called himself an artist that he really kind of said, "Hey, I'm an artist. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna sell this. This is gonna be a big part of my life," but you have to give yourself that permission. So as a writer, it's the same thing. You're a writer. Give yourself permission, you take that title and you do that, you start tracking that stuff down rather than assume that it's for someone else, and I think that is important for everybody kind of across the board. Once you really identify as that, then go get it. Give yourself permission to go do it.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as fishing goes, have you been doing any fishing, ice fishing or anything like that? Or are you mostly riding and thinking about the spring breakup and then summer?
I've gone ice fishing, I think, twice this winter. I usually go a lot more, but we just had so much going on, working for the paper and then working at the restaurant here at Burnt Toast here in Willow. I've been doing that 3 or 4 days a week, so that's been taking up a lot of time. And then, we just got 6 chickens last month, which is not a great time of the year to get chickens when it's -30, but that's taken up a lot of time, building a coop and putting all that together. We've had one chicken that had an injury that we had to take care of, and right now we currently have a chicken in our shower in our bathroom upstairs and taking care of that because they got a sickness that's now going through the whole flock, so we got to isolate them and give them meds. So just kind of learning the ropes on that. That's taken up a lot of time. But and I honestly I haven't really wanted to go fish when it's -30 outside. It's
Yeah.
not super pleasant. But now that things are warming up, I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I really want to get into more pike fishing. So that definitely picks up in like late February into March as those pikes start getting ready for the spawn. So I'll be doing a lot more ice fishing that time of year.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to breakup and kinda planning out my season. Yeah, really looking for I like fishing, like, in April when things are just starting to break up, when there's the ice is starting to leave, and you can target some of those trout that haven't been fished for, several months. last year we had a really good run of salmon, a lot of eggs in the system, a lot of flesh. In 24, we did not have very many, and coming into 25, our fish were pretty skinny, and I honestly think that we lost an age class of fish. We didn't have as many big
Mhm,
fish, and the ones that we did were really skinny coming in. So I'm really looking forward to this spring and seeing how many fish are gonna make it back and what state they're in, if they're gonna be super healthy and see how that affects our season. Because the beginning of our year last year was pretty tough before they really started putting on weight and before the salmon got there. Once the salmon got there, they got really fat, they got really healthy, and then we had salmon to target. But yeah, those trout were definitely hurting, and I'm really hoping that we have a good year this year.
mhm. Going back to the chickens there, you got a chicken in the shower on quarantine.
Yep. Yep.
Are you gonna write about that? I mean, sometimes it's hard to write about things that are going on, but something like that seems like a call and presented right to you.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thinking that's probably what I'm gonna write this next week. We believe she has coccidiosis. It's like a protozoa that they get that lives in the soil, and I think, when the temperatures get really low and those chickens get cold, even though I have a heated, insulated coop, it still gets super cold and it drops their immunity. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, this is like a protozoa and that is asymptomatic, but when their immunity gets low, it can flare up. And so she lost a lot of weight, lost a lot of feathers and was just super lethargic, wasn't eating. And so we have just like a regular, a medium sized dog crate that we put her in, built a little roost bar in there. I was trying to figure out how to build a roost bar because I don't want to get something round because especially when it's cold, if they try to hold on to that bar, they could get frostbite on their toes. And so
Mhm.
I try to get a 2x4. I'm like, well, how am I going to get this 2x4 in here? And it's just a regular cage crate. So I got a 2x4 that was not quite the width of the cage, and I put two long wood screws in either side so they can just rest perfectly on the side of the cage. So she has somewhere to roost. And then Emily, being a nurse, she has like a little 1 mil dropper syringe. And so every night we've been grabbing her, I've been holding her, and Emily grabs her waddle and opens her beak and she's force feeding her fluids. I ran to Alaska Farm Supply in Palmer yesterday and bought some. It's called Corid. It's a liquid amprolium, I think is what it is. And I have to do like mix it in with so many gallons of water. It was like 16 ounces per 100 gallons of water. And so I'm like, okay,
Wow.
well, I'm not going to do 100 gallons of water. So I divide it by 100. I get 1 gallon. So that's 0.16 ounces. And then, okay, how many teaspoons is that? So doing that whole conversion and then making sure she gets it. So, force feeding water to her. She's drinking now. She's eating on her own. So she's getting better. But now I have to treat the entire flock. So I'm making sure they get the same water. And then I'm going to have to completely deep clean the coop, which is scooping out all the pine shavings. And then, like, when they say deep cleaning for coccidiosis, it's like scrubbing the walls with hot soap and water and then completely disinfecting everything because the osis can survive in that environment. And if it gets too humid or if they don't have adequate airflow, it can flare back up and then you have to deal with it all over again. So it's a
Wow.
3 week process. It's initial 5 days of like a higher concentration, and then the next 21 days is a much lower concentration, and then cleaning the coop out a couple times a week and just trying to completely get rid of it. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but we have 4 chickens, and they were not, laying, and so I threatened them, and they
yeah.
started laying. They're not laying many, we're getting, like, maybe 1 or 2 per day, but it's, fine for us, and it's nice that they're laying, but, you start worrying about, moisture and
Mhm.
mink and all those sort of things, so, man, that sounds pretty serious. That's a lot of extra work.
Yeah, yeah, and it's our first time having chickens, and so I think a lot of it too is just not knowing. And I built the coop. I didn't know exactly what I was gonna have to do, like, access wise. Like right now, I have a really hard time accessing the back part of the coop because I made it kind of rectangular, but I only had an access door on one side. So now I'm learning like, hey, I probably should have built a door in the middle so I could access everything more evenly, which I'm probably gonna have to do to clean it. So just not knowing those things like coop design, I had pretty poor ventilation. And so last week I was noticing it was getting a little stuffy in there. and
Mm.
some of the hens were they kinda like a hoarse voice, and so I just drilled, like, 3 holes with a hole saw in the very top of my coop and just get a little bit more airflow, and be just doing that has made a huge difference. It doesn't smell, there's not as much
Mm.
moisture in there, it's not as stuffy, and, we were going from about we had 6 so we have 6 chickens, and we were getting about 2 eggs a day, and now that I added that extra ventilation, like, yesterday, I think we had 3, and the day before that, we had 4, and
Nice.
so we were I think just learning those things one part at a time is really, really helping out, but you don't know it until you try it, so
Yeah. Yeah, that design thing is pretty important. Mine's about 2.5 feet off the ground, so they can go underneath, and it's wrapped around, so they have kind of a dry spot.
Mhm,
If the rain comes sideways, there's a little bit kinda drains in underneath there, but they can stay out of the rain. But I have to, like I designed it so I could take a shop broom, and I could just take that, and I could kinda sweep everything out. But if you don't stay on top of it, like, they'll poo in the same area, and it just makes this mound. It's you still have to get in there, so I'm climbing there. Last night, I was climbed in there. I'm in the squat position, and I'm kinda just, getting that stuff out, and we
mhm,
have an automatic door, and right at the foot of the automatic door, they come in sometimes a little bit wet. It's kind of there's some moisture there, so I'm worried about the water. But,
mhm,
yeah, getting in there, and they were all in there too because it was dark, and they're like, "What's this guy doing in here?" And they were squawking at me. They weren't pecking me, which is nice. But, yeah, just a lot to it. Your design of this is all gonna work out until you make it, and
mhm.
until the chickens are in there, you have no idea how practical it's actually gonna be. And then the stuff that you can Google for a nice coop in, California or something like that might not be at all practical to your applications here in Alaska.
Yeah, for sure, and I so mine's off the ground too, it's about 2.5 feet off, and I have this, like, trap door that I can lift and close, and then I have a ladder coming straight out of the bottom, and I'm trying for right now, I've been feeding and watering them in the coop, which I know isn't the best because of that potential moisture in there. But I'm trying to teach them to like go down. I'm having a hard time getting them to go down. Granted, I know it's probably cold. Like some of our lead hen, Beatrice, she's just big, black, beautiful hen, and she's kind of a I don't know, I guess not aggressive, but she's definitely, like, in your face, like, I'll open the coop and she'll just, like, looking at me and, like, I'm afraid if I stick my head in there, she's gonna start, like, poking my eyeballs out or something, but she'll walk up and she'll, like, look down and use both sides of her head to look down this hole, and she's like, "You can't get me to walk down there right now," and I've been trying to grab 'em a couple of them at a time and, like, throw them down there and intrigue them with, like entice them with treats and try to get them down in there, and they'll hang out, and then they'll walk back up, but they won't walk back down, so that's definitely something I'm gonna have to be working on this spring and summer is trying to get them out there, and I threw it together in, like, a week because we adopted these chickens and he was like, "Hey, like, you're gonna need to have them get them out of here in, like, a week because 'cause we're moving." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I gotta build this really quick." Had I had more time, I would have probably built it different, and this summer, definitely building a bigger coop with a bigger run and taking some of these things into consideration that I've learned. And the coop right now as it is was just a lot of scraps. So I had, like, scrap
Mm.
metal roofing from the Arctic entryway that my dad and I built this fall, just random pieces of OSB subfloor from when we did our downstairs this last spring. So just kind of piecing it together with what I had to make it work. So definitely want to expand on it this year.
Yeah. We had difficult time getting them out, and then I put a roosting bar outside that was still covered. And then once it started getting cold, like, we couldn't get them to go back in. We have, like, one of those electric doors that opens and closes based on sunlight, and
Mhm.
they'd just be huddled outside on their 15, 20 degrees outside. I'm like, "You guys go inside." Like, why? So I had to take the outdoor roosting bar off so they would go back inside. Now we're getting that. But, yeah, this spring, I'm thinking about some way that I can get them from the coop to inside the garden because apparently they're pretty good at taking out slugs, and then the manure can help with fertilizing. I saw a video of there's this cage that they put the chickens in, and so they eat, so they get their forage from whatever they're eating, kinda in the crops, and they kinda move that cage throughout, and so they're fertilizing, and they're eating good stuff, but I need to get them into the garden place without exposing them to maybe eagles or whatever, and make it as easy as possible because I don't want to have to like pick them up, put them in some sort of cage, put the top on and move them. I want it to be as easy as possible to give them access. So I don't know, be a lot of Googling, I guess. But again, those applications are a lot of times for lower 48 stuff. It might not work at our place, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, those chicken tractors are pretty cool. Unfortunately, we don't have I mean, we have, like, forest, like, we've got a bunch of birch trees around us, but pretty much all of our accessible area is just gravel, which I'm not sure how much they would have. I'd love to let them free range, but again, we have a lot of eagles, we have a lot of foxes around here. It seems like every time we get a snow, I'll see a fresh track. There's usually 2 foxes that kinda live in my neighborhood, and so
Mm.
I just really am leery about letting them free range. I know there are people here in Willow that do. I'm just I've learned that chickens aren't necessarily they don't have the best self-preservation instincts, so I'm a
Yeah.
little concerned about letting them do that, but yeah.
Yeah. They look like food.
Yep.
Do you ever use any, or are you going to use any of the feathers for flies?
I was just telling Emily about that today. I'm like, "Man, these are some really pretty feathers." They don't have the long hackles like a rooster would have, but they do have some really good shorter feathers that I would definitely use for, like, maybe some soft hackle wraps, just like 1 or 2 turns at the head of the fly, behind the bead, or behind the eye. And then some of those I would use for, like, some of their longer feathers and fibers I would maybe use for, like, a instead of a pheasant tail, it would be like a chicken
Mhm.
tail fly or something. Just that the barring on there looks really nice. When you wrap some of those fibers around the hook and they have just, like, these little, like, micro little like, fibers on there that adds just a little bit more realism. I think those would look really pretty. So as I'm finding feathers, in the coop or on the ground or whatever, I'll take some of those definitely and use them,
Mhm.
or even some of their finer feathers underneath, even though it's not necessarily like what do you call that? Uh,
Dubbing?
yeah, well, a little bit of dubbing, but why can't I think of it? It's some of that little material that kind of like almost like holds an air bubble, makes it look a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, like the downy feathers. I like to use some of those at the head of some of my flies just because they do hold on to those air bubbles and gives it just a little bit more movement, a little more realism. Using some of those, looking forward to doing that.
Mhm. At this point, you've been guiding for a while. Are you always looking for ideas for new flies, or are you mostly just sticking to what you know works at this point?
A lot of it's sticking to my staples, so I know going into the spring, Alvin patterns are really good, like, early in the season, so tying a lot of, like, San Juan squirmy wormies, so I know that I need to tie a bunch of those. Moving to buggers as those fries start headed downriver, so I know that I need, like, several dozen white woolly buggers in my box, and then Dalai Lamas, that's, like, the quintessential Alaska fly.
Yeah.
I'll tie small ones and, like, olives, whites, blacks for imitating lamprey patterns for trout or other bait fish. Like, we have a lot of blackfish in the creek, and I've caught trout that have, like, spit up a big blackfish, or I've seen a lot of sculpin too. So imitating those and then tying those bigger and brighter for things like the chums, the pinks, the silvers. I'll tweak things a little bit. Like, I'll tie my buggers with a white body, a really sparse white tail, and then I'll wrap my hackle will be like a grizzly colored hackle, so it's got a little bit of almost like those par marks that are gonna be on the side, just add a little bit of contrast in that pattern, and then things like for my trout Dalai Lamas, I'm tying them, like micro llamas. Some of my llamas are only like 2.5, 3 inches long, and a lot of times when you buy a Dalai Lama at the store, you'll have, like, the dark green back and a white belly with a big bright piece of, flash on the side.
Right.
And I know that those work really well, but the later you get into the season, especially on some of these road system streams, those fish start to get used to it. And
Mm.
so I started tying mine maybe half the size or even a third of the size of what you would buy at the store. I'm using a tiny, tiny little piece of flash, and I'm only using one color. So it's not as big and bulky in the water. You don't have 2 colors, and it's not quite as bright and flashy, and I think that makes a huge difference, and just trying those little tweaks. Same thing for my salmon, I tie them even bigger than you can buy. Like, I'll tie some of my Dalai Lamas when they're wet, they're like 7 inches long.
Mm.
and you plop that thing down in front of a chum or a silver and strip that back really fast, and they just can't resist it. So trying some of those things, and then if I'm targeting like grayling or something, t- tying more dry flies like caddis, Chernobyl ants, chubby Chernobyls, and then different nymph patterns, and then just playing around with it. Sometimes I'm like, hey, like I know this works. Let's try something a little bit different today, or even just blind casting a dry fly and picking up a grayling or picking up a trout.
Mm.
Just trying something a little bit different. And we're starting to see, unfortunately, more pike in Willow.
Mm.
I I've seen a few in there before. I caught one, I think in 22 or 23, and then this last year I caught one out of Willow in one of these little, or one of the tributaries come in. There's like this big oxbow, and I'd seen a couple in there. I tried to put my client on them one day, and I wanted to use, a wire tippet, bite tippet, because I didn't want him to bite through the line, and
Right.
it was on an intermediate sinking head, and it was really just stagnant water and really shallow, and just that heavy line hitting the water spooked that fish. So I went back in there a couple days later, and I had like maybe like 20-pound Maxima. I just dropped in like a little. I literally walked up to it and I'm like, what can I catch this thing on? I tried it on a mouse, couldn't get him to eat the mouse. And I literally just like stuck my hand in my chest pocket on my waders and felt around. And I grabbed a fly out, and it was like a little 3-inch long chartreuse bugger that I had tied for like catching
Mm.
pink chums. Tied it on there, cast it out in front of that pike, couple little strips. I'm not sure if you've fished for pike much, but the pike are really interesting because they'll like see it, and they'll just like slowly move and turn at it. And then they've got those little fins, and they'll kind of just do like this little like they're thinking about it. You can definitely see it in their body language, like, I don't know if I'm gonna eat that or not. And they'll just slowly follow it, and they'll just strip slow. And then when they want it, they just surge right at it, and they open that big mouth, and you can see that fly just get sucked in.
Mm.
And caught him. He was only like, I don't know, maybe like an 18 or 20-inch pike, and obviously killed him because you can't in South Central, you got to kill all of them. But just doing things like that, changing things up a little bit and targeting different species in different ways and different systems is just it. That's something that really excites me, is changing it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, once the new year comes, you start to it's off in the distance still, but it seems like it's on the way, which is pretty sweet. But hey man, I gotta run. Where can people find your stuff? Can they go online and they can read the articles?
Yep, yep. You can go to the Frontiersman newspaper on their website, and you can type my name, I guess, in the search bar, and you'll see some of my articles there. I'll have a couple pieces out in Fish Alaska magazine this summer. I'm really excited to do that, and then working for some other companies like Alaska Gear Company, and you can find some of my work on their website as well.
Awesome. Good talking to you, man. Take care, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jeff.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please share. If you found today's conversation useful, you can go deeper with my writing on Substack. That's where I expand on these ideas from the show, share essays, reporting, and things I'm thinking about in real time. You can find it at From the 49th on Substack. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.